shame on you, he said to CNN, and we don't hate the fake news media enough. And this is one of the key questions right now in the United States as time goes by with the war in the West Asia. And there are reports, not only on the part of CNN, we had on Reuters, we had on Wall Street Journal reporting on the same thing. They didn't mention 80%, but they mentioned that literally the United States is running out of interceptors as time goes by with the war. What is your understanding of the way that the media is talking about these missiles and Pete Hegseth and the Department of War is talking about?
Well, first of all, understanding that we need to understand that to have a 100% factually correct foundation upon which to have this conversation, I would need access to classified information. And if I had classified information, I wouldn't talk about classified information. So there's a whole bunch of speculation going on, and everybody needs to understand that. But, you know, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure this out. I've been saying this for some time. We will run out of ammunition. You know, I've been saying this. I've been saying this all along. The ammunition expenditure rates far exceed ammunition replenishment rates. I'm just a simple Marine. I mean, but if I'm expending 10 and I can only produce 5, I'm not going to catch up. And eventually I'm going to run out of ammunition, and I'm not going to be able to build enough ammunition to replace. Simple Marine math. And this is the reality that's going on now. Hegseth and company seem to be fudging. In West Point, they would call it quibbling. You know, quibbling. It's not quite a lie, but it's not quite the truth either. You know what the truth is, but you're quibbling. You're saying something that isn't a lie, but it's not the truth. And that could get you kicked out of West Point as an honor code violation. Hegseth is quibbling because one of the way they're doing these numbers is that they're saying that the war with Iran is unsustainable, that we've run out of ammunition, therefore we cannot continue the campaign. And this is correct, except for a very important caveat. What if the Department of War, in order to continue the campaign against Iran, decided to draw down war reserve stocks in the Pacific and in Europe to levels that made it impossible for the United States to fight a war with China or Russia? Now, if you did this, if you were to do this, you could sustain the campaign against Iran until you literally run out of ammunition. Right now, we have run out of ammunition from a qualitative standpoint, meaning that the ammunition allocated for Middle Eastern conflict is gone, finished. There is no more left. But if we want to rob Peter to pay Paul, we could continue this. But here comes the dangerous part. And this is what people need to reflect on, just how utterly stupid and dangerously stupid Pete Hegseth is and his bosses. As we speak, the Pentagon is redoing the nuclear posture of the United States, nuclear posture policies, to include nuclear employment plans. These are very important documents. Why? Well, we now have to envision a war with China where we don't have enough ammunition to fight China. We now have to envision a war with Russia where we don't have enough ammunition to fight Russia. You remember Christopher Donahue, the recent commander of U.S. forces in Europe? I think it was January of last year. He came out and he said, Kaliningrad's only 47 miles. Wow, we could take it out tomorrow. We've been planning this. We're ready for it. We're going to do this. We got this in the bag. Well, no. First of all, the planning that he was done was predicated on a AI program called Maven. Maven was used to attack Iran, and we now know that Maven doesn't work because Maven just attacks the wrong things. It's stupid. So he was wrong. But let's say Maven did work. The ammunition necessary for Maven to succeed no longer exists. It's been taken away to the Middle East, thanks to Pete Hegseth. So now, if we were going to fight the Russians, we would have to, first of all, we would run out of ammunition very quickly, which means then we need to have something to replace it. And so now new war plans are being written as we speak that talk about the liberal use of tactical nuclear weapons early on in any conflict with Russia and China. Well, there's no such thing as a limited nuclear war.
This
A
is
tactical
just
nuclear weapon cannot be used
bombastic.
in isolation. So if we were to do these war plans, we're committing suicide. That's where we are today. This is the danger of what the Trump administration has done. There are ramifications. And I just want people to understand as we speak, and I've been warning about this a long time. I know there's haters out there. Scott's been crying wolf forever. There's no nuclear weapons. There's no nuclear danger. As we speak, the United States is redoing its nuclear war plans so that early on in any potential conflict with China and Russia, we would have no choice but to liberally use. That means not just once, we're going to sprinkle them around, tactical nuclear weapons to compensate for the fact that we have no conventional weapons capable of fighting a peer level opponent like China and Russia. That's where we are. This war in Iran is making the world a far more dangerous place, and people need to wake up. That's why I wrote a book called Highway to Hell, and that's why I picked the title. Because if we don't have arms control, we're on a highway to hell, and that means we're all going to die. People, oh, Scott, that's sort of like Armageddon, like you're being irresponsible. Am I? Am I being irresponsible? Because if we don't have arms control, these nuclear war plans will be implemented because Donald Trump isn't wise enough to back away from bad policy options, especially with China. He's doubled down on the Pacific. Right now, Taiwan is openly bragging about secret military relationships with the United States. And China's going, what? And at some point in time, they might get in a shooting match. When they do, China will crush Taiwan. And then when that happens, the United States will kick in with a war plan because we can't just sit back and do nothing. And that war plan will now incorporate liberal use of tactical nuclear weapons early on, preemptively. This is where we're at. I mean, I don't know how much louder I need to scream. I mean, it's getting to the point where I'm just starting to laugh about it because of the inevitability of our demise. It's not a matter of, if, it's a matter of when, because we're too stupid to do anything about this. I mean, to be honest, there is a solution. It's called the vote. I just did a rant on YouTube. I encourage people to go watch it. I said, what would Donnie do? That's the name of the rant. Donnie, of course, being not Donald J. Trump, the 47th president of the United States, but Donnie. Donnie from The Apprentice. He used to have a show called The Apprentice, and Donnie would bring people together and have them do things. And when they screwed up, he'd turn to them and say, you're fired. So now we have to ask ourselves, what would Donnie do when confronted with the incompetence of Donald Trump? And we know what the answer is. You're fired. And if we don't fire him and everybody else affiliated with him and everybody else thinking it's a good idea to have a new nuclear posture plan that uses the liberal use of tactical nuclear weapons early on in the conflict, if we don't fire them, we're going to die. That's where we are.
Scott, Donald Trump decided not to attack Iran. He said that this time going to be, we're going to destroy everything, power grids, infrastructure, oil facilities, everything. And then Iran responded, they're going to do the same to GCC countries and Israel. And finally, he canceled the attack. And for those people who are against war, they understand that many people are happy because they don't want any sort of escalation with the war. But the reality is Donald Trump is being cornered in the West Asia, in the Strait of Hormuz. There is, what is your understanding on the way that he's trying to somehow, today we've learned from Associated Press that there is a deal between the Omani government and Iranians, which needs to be ratified by the Supreme National Security Council in Iran and the Supreme Leader of Iran. And they didn't still ratify the negotiations between Iran and Oman. But after all, the Iranian side said it doesn't mean that they're going to open up the Strait of Hormuz. It means that there is a new deal between the two governments. And the opening of the Strait of Hormuz is dependent on what's going on between Iran and the United States. What is your understanding of that?
Well, again, the same answer as before. We're dealing with a lot of speculation here. We're seeing reports. We know that oftentimes the media space is used by multiple parties to achieve information dominance for whatever reasons. But I said this a long time ago on this show. In fact, we can hit rewind. I said that I think ultimately there will be a face-saving deal made in the Strait of Hormuz between Iran and Oman. and then Oman will cut a side deal with the United States. That appears to be what's happening here. There is no direct negotiation between Iran and the United States. There's a negotiation between Iran and Oman about opening up the Strait of Hormuz. What the status of collecting tolls is? Will it be deferred? Will it be eliminated? Don't know. But there will be a side deal between Oman and the United States that'll give the United States the pretense that it is responsible for the opening up of the Strait of Hormuz. And because they have leverage with Oman, they haven't ceded the totality of control to Iran. We know that's absurd, but this is the political face-saving mechanism that could be made available and appears to be part of this negotiation. What the Iranian government does, I don't know, because they're not in the mood for face-saving gestures to Donald Trump. One of the things they've said is the United States has to stop threatening that there can be no deal as long as these threats. What was interesting, right before we came on, I was just scrolling through, and again, it's dangerous to scroll through internet feeds, but it appears that the Treasury Department has lifted the terrorist designation on 3 IRGC entities that had previously. So it appears the United States is doing some, because Iran has always said things has to be done up front. We're not going to do something and wait for America to act. And so it appears that there are things happening right now to make this deal possible. That if this is true, the Treasury Department is doing away with certain classifications of IRGC that will free them from sanctions. It's creating a new reality, a legal framework of reality. These are things that Iran had demanded be done, and it appears that some of them are at least being done. Again, will it be to the satisfaction of the Iranian government? I don't know. Can't speak for them. What I do know is this, that this is a temporary measure linked to the MOU that basically resets the clock on the requirement for 60 days for the United States and Iran to come up with a nuclear deal. And therein lies the rub, because Iran's just not going to do anything on that front. There are some face-saving things that can be done that Iran could do. We've talked about this before. I don't know if Iran's inclined to do that. If they do, if they allow Donald Trump a face-saving mechanism out of the Strait of Hormuz problem, in theory, they could consider a face-saving mechanism out of the nuclear deal, which would be basically somehow to revive the nuclear deal that had been agreed to before the United States bombed Iran in February. We know that agreement was approved by the Iranian government. Of course, we live in a different world today, and maybe politically they don't want to do that. But if they did that, that would allow Donald Trump to say, I have a better deal than the one Barack Obama had, which is a political victory, because then he can roll into the American people and say, I have secured the Strait of Hormuz, and I have a better nuclear deal than Barack Obama had. And the Iranians can just say, whatever, smoke your dope and go away, and we can move on. But is Donald Trump willing to accept that? The problem is we're dealing with a man who the Russian government has labeled as emotionally unstable. He's not a rational actor. We know that in the case of Saudi Arabia, we saw him throw away a negotiation that was 6 to 8 months long about nuclear enrichment and demand that Saudi Arabia sign on the Abrams Accords at the last second, something that wasn't part of the negotiation. Why? He just woke up in a bad mood. He may wake up in a bad mood at any time between now and 60 days. Who knows how this man works? This is a man who's not rational. He speaks of, inflicting huge harm on Iran. I mean, he's a man who, has become addicted to this concept that he wields the tools of power, that he can inflict pain, and that he's godlike in his ability to dispense pain or hold pain off, that he, Donald Trump, is a supreme entity, a deity. How do you deal with a man like this? You don't. But you have to deal with situations, and I think that's what Iran appears to be doing. Look, the Iranian government knows that they have the military capacity to prevail. They know this. They also know that if Donald Trump did kick it up a notch, that there would be serious harm done to Iran's economy, that would last for decades. It would also bring about serious harm to the global economy, because Iran would be compelled now to act on its own threats of destroying Middle East energy production. Is that the route Iran as a nation state wants to go in? I don't believe so. Is it one they need to go in? Absolutely not. Both Russia and China, I believe, are behind the scenes advocating for long-term stability, which means you have to bring it into this conflict. The conflict has to end on terms that are acceptable to Iran. But for instance, Russia has said the conflict in Ukraine won't end until the root causes of the conflict are addressed. So Russia is sympathetic to the Iranian plight, but also Russia knows that sometimes compromises have to be made, as Vladimir Putin attempted to do in Anchorage, in 2025, August 2025. So I think there's some political pressure being put on the Iranians to not yield on issues of sovereignty, but and not yield on issues of substance. But when it comes to the political imagery that surrounds this, that cloaks this situation, maybe the best way to find an off-ramp is to allow Donald Trump to make a statement that has no meaning on the geopolitical sphere, but could have meaning on the domestic political sphere, something that assuages the insult to the American public that a defeat in the Middle East would bring. Who knows? But I think that's the direction we're heading. If we had a rational leader in the United States, I think that this would be the direction we were heading in, and that I could say with confidence that we're out of the woods. But we're dealing with Donald Trump. We're not out of anything. He can change at a moment's notice.
How do you see the way that Israel is talking? We know that recently there was a meeting between Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu. It seems that the meeting didn't go well at all. But Benjamin Netanyahu came out and said this was one of the best meetings I have ever had with Donald Trump. And when your understanding of, I assume that Israel would be more than happy if the United States stays in the region. The conflict goes on and on and on, the two sides fighting each other, and they're basically sitting aside and having no problem with that. And because the battleground would be GCC countries and Iran, and the United States and Iran killing each other, basically. Iran hitting the U.S. bases, American soldiers, and the United States hitting Iranian, militaries and, the cities and all these ports and all of it. This is what I think, after all, would be beneficial for Benjamin Netanyahu and his position in Israel, because he says that the war has started. We are in a good shape right now. We are not doing anything, but we are benefiting from the chaos that has been created in the West Asia. Do you think that they're going to be able to continue this way? It seems to me that they're capable of manipulating the whole situation. And what is your understanding of that?
My understanding is that Benjamin Netanyahu is in a political fight for his life right now, that his party is not doing well at the polls. In the coming election, he will probably lose the prime minister spot and open himself up for prosecution and imprisonment. That's my feeling right now. And to Benjamin Netanyahu, that's all that matters. He doesn't care about Israel. He cares about Benjamin Netanyahu. He's the Israeli version of Donald Trump, a narcissist wrapped in the pretense of a national leader. And the same thing holds true with the totality of the Israeli political scene. They're pushing each other around, jostling to see who's going to be number one. There are certain realities. Let's look at the Israeli economy. It's non-functioning. So how could you say this is good for Israel? It's a non-functioning economy. Let's look at the Israeli military. They have no air defense. And you want to speak about leverage? The commanding general of U.S. forces in Europe has told the Pentagon, if you don't get me more destroyers, because basically our ballistic missile defense shield globally is heavily dependent upon Aegis class destroyers equipped with SM-3, SM-6 interceptors. If you don't get me more dedicated to Europe, I'm going to have to withdraw destroyers that are currently being used to protect Israel, because the priority must be protection of the homeland. The Israelis are like, what? You're doing what? You can't take that ship away because that's the only thing that shoots down missiles. We're out of missiles. We're out of missile defense. Only the United States has missiles. And now you're talking about removing this. And I think this is also leverage against Israel. to let them know that you're not number one. Listen to that statement he made. It's very rare you get a senior military official to make such a statement. If I don't get another destroyer, I'll have to pull one off from Israel because defending America is more important than defending Israel. Ooh. I think that was a heck of a signal. And I think it's a signal that's been repeated over and over and over again to Netanyahu, which is why Israel is suddenly compliant. Now, we all know that the Israelis sit there and they just blabber their mouths because it's all about political posturing. But the reality is, what is Israel doing? And the answer is not a damn thing. Then the next question is, why not? Because they can't. If Israel got opened up to attacks, Israel cannot defend itself. And if Israel expands the war in a manner which puts American resources at risk, we will do to Israel what we already did to the Japanese and the South Koreans: strip away capacity to protect ourselves. So I think Israel's just not in as strong a position as everybody thinks they are. I think Netanyahu is politically weak because of upcoming elections where his party probably won't do well. And they're militarily weak. You know, they can sit there and talk all they want. The bottom line is they're not doing well in Lebanon. They can't advance. They're getting slaughtered. Hezbollah drones are picking them off. Politically, they're becoming weaker in Lebanon. I mean, though Tom Barak, negotiated this deal, that deal was not between Lebanon and that was between Lebanese president and Israel. Lebanon doesn't support that. Hezbollah is a power in Lebanon. Israel is occupying illegally Lebanon, and Hezbollah is strengthened by this illegal occupation, and even more strengthened after the stupid deal cut between the Lebanese president and Israel and the United States. I mean, Israel's just not in a strong position. They posture as such, but they're not in a strong position.
We know that one of the main reasons for Iran, at least from what we've heard from the Iranian position, is that it's all about the Strait of Hormuz, that the control, the dominance on the Strait of Hormuz. Basically, the priority is the Iranian security. They don't want the United States to send more weapons, radars to these GCC countries to prepare for new attacks, new round of attacks on Iran. And that's one of the main reasons that they're controlling the Strait of Hormuz. They know that the United States can bring those weapons using the aircrafts and that. But at least when it comes to the Strait of Hormuz, they want to control that. The other point is the way that Iran is somehow escalating the war with Iraqi Kurdistan. We've seen how they have forced somehow the United States to withdraw those air defense systems, Patriot systems in Iraqi Kurdistan, because if they don't remove them, they're going to be hit by Iranian missiles or drones. This is the way that you can protect them, and sending them to Israel. And they had ground operations, Scott. The Iranian special forces had ground operations in Iraqi Kurdistan, which could happen to Bahrain, I would say to Kuwait, if the escalations happen in the region. But overall, when you look at the situation Iran is in and is trying to avoid new round of wars, do you think, are they going to be able to avoid that by controlling the Strait of Hormuz? Or sooner or later, the United States is going to bring more weapons, more munitions, logistics, and they're going to come back even under the Trump administration? Because I don't know if the next president of the United States is going to be, this is Donald Trump. We know that the difference, even Joe Biden, in those days, he didn't decide to go that far into West Asia. I don't know, what is your understanding of that?
It seems to me that the Iranians have, made the Strait of Hormuz their ultimate trump card, and they've linked it to the totality of the obligations incurred by the Memorandum of Understanding. So, they're not going to allow the United States to pick and choose what parts of the MOU the United States wants to adhere to or disregard. As far as Iran seems to be concerned, if the United States violates one thing, everything's broken, and the Strait of Hormuz goes back to being shut down. So it's the ultimate card. So I don't see the United States having any flexibility down the road. Now, as we've seen in the past, when Donald Trump, first signed the MOU, he said, I had no choice but to sign it because Iran had oil. So how long does it take for us to, get our oil stocks back up to where this emotionally unstable man suddenly feels like, hey, I bought a little time. We can go in and play the game a little bit more. He can fool himself into, having some, interceptor production, get surged to the Middle East and say, we got enough now for a week or two of fighting. Maybe this time I can get the Iranians to break. Who knows? It's very unpredictable when it comes to Donald Trump. But I think the Iranians have made the case, and they've articulated this, that it's all or nothing, that it's the totality of the MOU or nothing, that the United States doesn't get to pick and choose what parts it's going to comply with and what parts it's going to disregard. So hopefully there are people who are advising Donald Trump. And again, it doesn't matter because the man is emotionally unstable, highly irrational, and he'll do whatever the hell he wants to do.
Yeah. In the MOU, there was no mention of Yemen or Palestine. And right now, Yemen is defining its policy, is reshaping the region based on their policy, their sort of leverage that they're experiencing right now. And today we had a new attack. One of the, their missile hit one of the Saudi tankers in the Red Sea. And they're trying to control the Red Sea. And I assume they're receiving intelligence. I don't know what is the communication, but they need intelligence coming out of somewhere to help them with the case of Bab al-Mandab. And they're doing this, it seems, effectively to put pressure on Saudi Arabia. Do you think that the blockade would force Saudi Arabia to change its more than a decade policy toward Yemen?
Yeah, I think so. It's a trump card. I mean, when Saudi Arabia diverts 70% of its oil production to Yanbu, and by going to Yanbu, you now have to either come out the Bab el-Mandeb or shoot up to the Suez Canal, which is, from a cost effectiveness perspective, not cost effective at all. Indeed, some of the larger tankers can't go through the Suez Canal. So it's a trump card that Ansarallah now has, and they're wielding it very effectively. And the beauty of it is, Iran can continue to, impact global energy markets by, just having Ansarallah shut down Bab el-Mandeb. Iran can say, it's not part of the MOU, not my business, and yet make it their business. So the Iranians are very, very clever in their negotiations. They linked Lebanon, but they didn't link Ansarallah. They didn't link Gaza, but they've linked Gaza. Remember, Gaza